Oh, welcome to the Gambling Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Money Mainville. We have got another episode for you. It is February. That's the middle of February, whenever you're watching this. I keep doing that. It's February 11th. That's radio stuff. And on Tuesday, you're not listening to this on Tuesday. We're recording on Tuesday. You might be listening in the next couple of days. We'll have a little bit of recap from the weekend, Arizona and the Super Bowl. We'll also do a little Patrick Mahomes legacy talk. That's all on this episode. If you're part of the Patreon, you can stick around for the Arizona State recap preview. We're going to recap it before it even happens. We're going to preview that one and also do the mailbag. So that's all today. If you're on YouTube or the Republican football feed, you can certainly listen to the first half and then obviously stick around if you are on the Patreon. As always, as part of the rundown today, the PPTC rundown, you can find us doing those things. And that includes looking back at Arizona and the Super Bowl, which neither were great. So we'll do that today. And what else are we going to do? Is that everything we talked about?
I think
That's
so.
everything we talked about. Yeah. So let's get into it. And if you get into it, maybe with your you're a former reliever for the Mets or a former reliever with the Braves, and you get into it on Bourbon Street, and you need to call a lawyer, you can do so by calling Brandon Barnett. He could take care of you. I don't know if he would in that particular instance, but certainly if it happened in Texas and you needed him, you could certainly call him. And his new team here in Lubbock, the Payne, Powell, Truitt, and Chandler law firm will take care of you. They handle the family law, criminal defense, Title IX, personal injury, estate planning, and more there. And you can get a hold of them. I probably should look up more about their website before I start doing ad reads for them. I'm sorry, Brandon. Those will get better. It's just I knew all the former stuff by heart, and now I'm having to look it up. But the next ad read for them is going to be incredible. You can guarantee it, money. It's going to be incredible, and it's going to be 5 minutes long, and just the most electric ad read you've ever heard.
Can't wait.
Maybe not 5 minutes, but at least a minute. All right, let's move on to Arizona. Arizona and Texas Tech played this weekend. And as happens in the Big 12, if you lose a close game to a ranked opponent, you move up one spot in the AP poll. Texas Tech goes to 12. Now, I'm assuming that's a lot of guys who ranked you or unranked you last week kind of catching up to what you've done in the last 3 weeks. We're getting roasted for not having you ranked last week. And the same with Arizona. Arizona and Texas Tech still both unranked in at least one poll. So I think a lot of people are catching up to what these two teams are doing. Arizona currently down to Kansas State, so we'll keep an eye on that score as well. Even though the Big 12 refs tried to screw Kansas State in the first half, and then they went on a 7-0 run to tie it up and then took a big lead into halftime. So that game is currently ongoing. I am the biggest Kansas State fan for the rest of the season because you don't have to play them again. And well, until I guess the Big 12 tournament, but even then it wouldn't matter. So hopefully the Big 12 tournament doesn't matter for Texas Tech. But let's get into this Arizona game specifically. And I can think of more guys who are bad for Texas Tech against Arizona than were good. And maybe really only Christian Anderson was great.
Yeah, I think it's fair. It was the complete opposite of what you did to them on your home court. That first game, which was pivotal, you had to be more physical. You had to out rebound them. You had to win in the paint, and you had to use the inside out game to force their defense to collapse and to get you some open looks. That was exactly what Arizona did to you in this game. Didn't shoot the ball well. Again, you have a good game defending the perimeter, but they pummeled you down low. They out rebounded you by 13. They scored 48 points in the paint, which was 20 more than you did. Um, Man, this was interesting because I think the broadcast was showing a lot of love to JT Toppin, and he had a good game. I mean, he scored 21 and had 10, but it was not his best game by far, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And I agree with you. Like, I think Elijah Hawkins ends up with a double double with 12 assists to 1 turnover. I thought that was huge, but once again, I want to get into this a little bit later. He does not shoot well inside the arc, shoots 1 of 5. Most of those are right at the rim or mid range bunnies. Chance McMillan, I think this one kind of puzzled me because I figured after his performance, he would have been a lot more involved in the offense. And it kind of felt like in this game, you were just waiting for him to get in a rhythm, but it just never really happened. He shot 1 of 6 from deep. So one of his worst shooting games of the year as a 50% three-point shooter. Darion Williams, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but he is in the midst of a not great, to say the least, 6-game streak. Obviously dealing with an ankle injury that we don't really know how much or how little that is affecting him right now, but I think it's something to be considered. Kerwin Walton just does cardio in this game, has a really bad turnover, and never sees the floor again. Christian Anderson was promising. I want to show him some love later. Federico, yikes. Not a great game. 4 fouls in 14 minutes, just couldn't stay on the floor. Had some good defensive possessions, but was just absent offensively. And then Kevin Overton again, just not seeming to be in a rhythm after he missed a game with a head injury. So I agree with you, Rob. Looking at the box score, it's not great. And I think there are some things like I know a lot of people were complaining about the refs after this game, which never happens with this fan base. Let me be clear. But a lot of people complaining about the refs. They did shoot, I think, 10 more free throws than you did. But I think the way they got those free throws was earned. They did not just get an easy whistle every single possession. They were earning those down low around the rim, and you weren't. You were getting outplayed there. And I think that's the story of the game.
Hey, Kyle.
So,
you toughest team wins. I think Texas Tech has been the toughest team for 5 or 6 games now. Obviously, in the win streak, they were not on Saturday, and it was fairly obvious. You got work down low. Pretty good still on the perimeter defensively, but they got some open shots and knocked them down. And their best players were better than your best players, and it was fairly obvious the complete game.
Yeah, I know Tommy Lloyd gets a lot of nonsense thrown his way about what he does in March Madness, and at some point that's certainly going to have to improve at Arizona with their history and their reputation. But this guy's a good basketball coach. Like, this guy is coaching Olympic teams for a reason because he's smart. He knows the game. He knows how to win games. It's what he's done everywhere he's been. And this felt like a coaching masterclass. And I'm not saying like Grant dropped the ball on this one. Texas Tech wasn't prepared. I just wonder if you didn't think like, hey, we've been doing this for 6 games in a row now, and nobody can seem to figure it out. And we already did it to this team. I wonder if you try to stick to your guns instead of, looking back more holistically and thinking about, okay, where does Arizona have unique strengths? Where might they be able to exploit us where they didn't necessarily in the first game? What were some big points of emphasis? And I think that's always the tough balance in coaching is how much do I just trust my guys and, obviously work in a scout. But basketball is really just one starting at tip off. Like it's really hard to scout and prepare and game plan in college basketball on a game to game basis, especially at the cadence of this league. And so, I mean, you have a team that's top 10 in the country in efficiency over the last month. I think you don't want to mess with that too much. I just think Arizona perfectly countered what you showed them in that first matchup.
Arizona has not lost to anyone in the Big 12 except for Texas Tech on the road. They are currently tied with Kansas State back at 48-48.
Who's like the best analytical team over their last 5 games in the country.
Which is insane based on where they started.
Yeah.
If I gave you Arizona, Houston, Texas Tech as the top 3 teams in the Big 12, obviously those 3 are the field on a regular season Big 12 championship. Would you take the 3 or the field?
The 3.
And if I gave you Texas Tech and Arizona or the field, who'd you take?
Man.
It feels like right now it's going to be Arizona, but
yeah.
They have a tough
Iowa State's still sneaky.
Yeah.
Who knows what Baylor is? I can't figure them out. I can't figure Kansas out.
Mommy's back.
Yeah.
Mom Silovich.
Baby Dirk.
Yeah. Speaking of, what do you think about Dirk being at Luka's debut in Los Angeles?
I loved it. Just absolutely spite the Mavs, and I love that he was sitting with his dad. That was the best part.
That was awesome. All right. Anything else on Arizona specifically? Or you want to highlight Christian Anderson?
Yeah, I just think he always seems to have his best games when everyone else around him is not playing well. Like these are the kind of games where he shines. And I think part of it is you have so many mouths to feed on this team that a guy coming off the bench, a true freshman, isn't going to be one of your top priorities in the game plan, regardless of how good he is. You have 5 legit options on this team that you can play through. He really shines when he's off the ball, catching and shooting, running out on the perimeter. I just don't think you always draw things up for him. But for a guy who's a true freshman, still really young, to be able to play like he does in those positions is really, really impressive to me. Because, I mean, going into league play, I thought he had a legit argument for being the starting one on this team because Elijah Hawkins was playing so poorly. Christian Anderson was giving you such a good burst of scoring. I thought that maybe that was the direction this team would go. Elijah Hawkins starts playing like an all Big 12 player at the start of league play, and that kind of fizzles out. But he's kind of embraced a role on this team as that plan B kind of guy. Like, hey, I know what I can do night to night, and I might score like 6 points, get a couple of assists, have a good, defensive stretch. That's cool. But on other nights when you need me, I'll go out and I'll drop 15 and I'll make 3 threes. I'll get to the rim. I'll draw fouls. I'll kick it out to my teammates. I'll play good defense. And I think that's huge. I think, there's a lot of really good basketball for a really good team that I think has a chance to win a lot of games come March. But to think about what he could even be next year as he returns. Let's just assume JT Toppin and Darion Williams leave to go to the draft. You won't have Elijah Hawkins. You won't have Chance McMillan. You won't have Kerwin Walton. This guy is your number one heading into the offseason. And I think he's got a chance to play anywhere. I think this guy could get rotational minutes for Auburn, Houston, Kentucky. But I think he kind of is in a unique position to. I mean, he has the keys next year. There's nowhere else to do it, and obviously you're going to replenish in the transfer portal. But the way that you honed in on Chance McMillan, Kerwin Walton, Darion Williams, those guys sticking around, you're going to have that same level of urgency with this guy come this offseason.
It's always weird talking about the transfer portal in college basketball nowadays because it really could be, you know, anywhere from 6 new guys to 13, just with how it goes. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Obviously, lots of basketball to be played now. We'll talk about Arizona State soon. But let's get into Patrick Mahomes first and the Super Bowl. Kyle, I keep hearing that Patrick Mahomes' legacy is dead. He'll never catch Tom Brady now. And if you remember after last year's Super Bowl, we had guys on the podium glazing Mahomes as the new GOAT. And now people are glazing everyone else but Patrick. Patrick's dead. He'll never do anything else. And his career is over.
Was there a question in there, or?
I just wanted you to take it from there, man. I just was setting you up to run free, man.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. Where to begin? I do think that there is a tendency to like overreact in the moment, which is totally natural. That happens all the time. So no, I don't think one game, especially in the Super Bowl, to me, if you've won the AFC or the NFC, whatever happens after that can't really, I don't know, can't really be counted as like a knock against you. So yes, there were guys that were ready to say he was the best ever after last season, just based on that playoff run and everything. I think Chris Broussard with, I think the show is called First Things First. I can't keep them straight with like First Take, Hot Take, all that. I think it's called First Things First. But he calls Mahomes the boat. Like Brady's the GOAT, Mahomes is the boat, the best of all time. I think it's tough to have a conversation. Well, let me back up. I think the fact that people are even talking about Mahomes and Brady while Mahomes is 29 kind of speaks to how outrageously good he is. Aaron Rodgers, based on a lot of like per game, per play, passing metrics, you could definitely make the statistical case that like he's the best passer of the football ever. He won't play long enough to catch Brady's like total yards, total touchdowns. But if you looked at like through the first 200 games of a player's career, 250 games of a player's career, anybody who hasn't played longer than Rodgers is chasing Rodgers. Rodgers has, I believe, the highest career passer efficiency of all time. Has like 3 of the top 5 seasons, 2 of the top 8 seasons, something like that for season-long passer rating. His MVP seasons, if you go look at what he did statistically, really for like a decade from 2010-ish through 2020 when he was MVP. I don't know if anybody's had a better statistical decade than that in the history of the sport. All that to say, Aaron Rodgers is 41 and is nowhere near the conversation for GOAT. So it's crazy that Mahomes could play for 12 more years and we're already having that conversation about Mahomes. Are either of y'all familiar with economics?
I've heard the term.
You know, supply and demand, things of that
Sure.
nature.
Yeah, I took a macroeconomics class in college.
Do you know what the term? Could you define the term opportunity cost for me?
With the context of supply and demand, no, probably not.
There's no context with supply and demand. Opportunity cost is the cost of an opportunity gone by, and I think that's where Mahomes' legacy was damaged in in the real sense. I'll talk about kind of what I think is not real in a minute, but he did have a chance to do something nobody's ever done before with the three-peat. I think, honestly, in many ways, very comparable to Brady in '07, going for a 19-0 season after what was also an MVP season, statistically great season. Had he done that, Brady at the time would have been 4-0 in Super Bowls, so tied with Bradshaw and Montana, would have had the stats, the accolades, the undefeated season. Like, I think he would have been considered the GOAT even in 2007. Didn't work out. And he went to one more Super Bowl 4 years later, lost that one, and then wound up, it was a decade in between his third and fourth ring. So he was 37 by the time he won ring number 4. And then I think the season after that, maybe 2 seasons after that, Peyton got ring number 2. So Peyton's sitting there with 5 MVPs, 2 rings. Brady's got 2 MVPs, 4 rings. There was still, in my mind, a debate on which one of those guys was better when Brady was like approaching 40. It was only after Manning retired, Brady goes on an insane run past the age of 40, wins 3 more rings before calling it quits, that it was like, okay, yeah, he's so far ahead of everybody else. So I do think there was kind of an opportunity cost to this loss, that Mahomes had a lot to gain by winning. I would have been ready to say he's the GOAT, even though it's 4-7. You know, when MJ retired the first time, he had 3 rings, and people were calling him the GOAT. Uh, Even after he came back and got 3 more, he still had fewer than Bill Russell and is considered the GOAT. I think there's, not to totally derail this, I think LeBron has a legitimate case. I I think they're pretty co-equal, and LeBron only has 5 championships if you count the in-season tournament. um, but I never thought that it was all about rings. Like, I thought if a guy could get to 4 or 5 rings and have certain statistics or accolades, that he could at least maybe be on par with Jordan. I think it's the same with Brady. I think a lot of people are, it's just ring counting to them, and like, unless and until Mahomes gets 8, there's no conversation in their mind. I view it a little differently. For the same reason, I don't think Bill Russell is the greatest of all time.
It
So I do think there was an opportunity cost to losing this game. But no, I mean, if he, let's say he wins it next year and like has ring 4 at age 30 and has been to, at that point, 4 straight Super Bowls, 6 Super Bowls in 8 years as a starter, like, no, the conversation will start right back up again. And I think that's where our attention span is so short, that like a guy loses a game in the Super Bowl where his team had no chance. Like, yes, Mahomes contributed to that with 2 really bad interceptions deep in their own territory, one of them a pick six. But like, from the jump, when you're rushing 4 and getting a 52% pressure rate, and like DeAndre Hopkins drops the only positive play in the first half, like, you have no shot. So to me, it would have almost been worse if, like, I don't know, the Eagles won 6-3 and Mahomes just like choked opportunity after opportunity. Like, the game was over at halftime, which is really unfortunate. Um,
Yeah, Brady won 2 Super Bowls scoring 13.
yeah, and that's what I was going to get to next. Is like, there is it's a team game, like, even more so than basketball. In basketball, there's 5 dudes on the floor, and they're both playing offense and defense. So one player can have a really outsized impact on overall team performance. Brady's first Super Bowl, in the entire playoffs that year, he led 2 touchdown drives and 1 Super Bowl MVP after leading the offense to 13 points on 145 yards passing. He won another Super Bowl, also scoring 13 points. Defense didn't give up a touchdown. Won another Super Bowl with his defense not giving up a touchdown. And so, like, I look at the Tampa Bay loss and the Philadelphia loss in the Super Bowl, and it's like, I mean, do you think if Tom Brady was standing back there facing a 52% pressure rate while the defense is dropping 7 in coverage, that, like, he would have magically fared better? I don't, because I saw him against more favorable defensive looks, and he scored 13 points and was able to win the game that way. Could have won the Super Bowl scoring 13 points. His last one in 2020 with Tampa Bay, like, they wound up scoring 31. They didn't need all of them. Um, Brady, I'd have to double check. He's either never won a ring without a top 6 defense or without a top 8 defense. I think Mahomes has only had that same level of defense once in his career with the Chiefs. That was last year. Mahomes won a Super Bowl with, I think, the 12th ranked defense and the 21st ranked defense. I'd have to double check those numbers. But two things that Brady never did in a 23-year career. He never won a ring with a defense that bad. There's now been 59 Super Bowl champions. If you sorted those 59 Super Bowl champions based on how many points per drive each defense surrendered in the playoffs, Mahomes won a ring with number 58 and number 59 on that list. It's wild to me what some people forgot about Tom Brady's career. And most of these are just like burner account haters, but it has creeped into like the mainstream commentary a little bit that like, oh, Mahomes was always carried by his defense. Mahomes is carried by Andy Reid. Andy Reid was a head coach in the NFL for 2 decades, 19 years, was 0-1 in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes becomes the starting quarterback. They go to 5 Super Bowls, win 3 of them. Like, again, it's a team sport. Andy Reid's a good coach, but we had a plenty big sample size of Andy Reid without Mahomes, and it was not anywhere near what the Chiefs dynasty has been over the last 5 or 6 years. People saying that like, okay, one blowout loss in the Super Bowl, you can never be considered the GOAT. I don't think it's any better to get blown out in the divisional or wild card round, which happened to Tom Brady multiple times at the hands of not a Super Bowl champion, but like Jake Plummer, Joe Flacco, Mark Sanchez. Teams that like may have had good defenses, sure, but allowing a guy to skate because he failed to win the same level of playoff games going for a three-peat that Mahomes did win is just it's a weird double standard to me. To me, it's clear that objectively speaking, people are holding Mahomes to a higher standard. It's like, oh, you didn't three-peat, well, you can't even be in the GOAT conversation. Well, why? There's not a long list of other guys who have three-peated. Brady went for a three-peat once. They went like 9-7 or 10-6, and then he lost to Jake Plummer in the playoffs. Why is that a more valiant effort than beating Josh Allen, the most productive playoff quarterback in NFL history on a per-game basis in the AFC Championship game? That's the part that I don't get, is like people memory hold that decade where Brady lost to some pretty bad quarterbacks, lost to good quarterbacks like Peyton Manning as well, but blew an 18-point lead against Peyton Manning. So I don't know. Maybe when more time goes by, people will reassess and kind of actually compare them side by side and say, okay, yes, Mahomes and the Chiefs got blown out in a Super Bowl, and also Tom Brady had a decade run here, like without much noteworthy going on. Had 2 MVP seasons in the middle of that. Mahomes has already had 2 MVP seasons. Like, yeah, if Mahomes goes a decade without a ring, then sure, he'll probably be too far behind Brady's pace. But you're right. You might remember when we did the Super Bowl recap last year, I said like he's got some cushion now. He's got 3 rings. Brady had 3 rings going into his age 37 season. Now I do think it would be really hard for Mahomes to replicate what Brady did in the final 5 years of his career because nobody plays that well after age 40. But like if he gets 2 more in the next 7 seasons, let's say, and it's 5-7, and Mahomes still has like 3 years left maybe to go all in, then I think there's like certainly going to be a conversation at the end of it. So I don't know. Maybe people they're just too entrenched with this mindset that like if you lose on the biggest stage, that's worse than losing in the wild card round or the divisional round. I think a lot of people were never going to consider Mahomes no matter what, unless it was just like, okay, he wins 12 rings and it's undeniable. But yeah, I don't think anything has happened that he like fell off of Brady's pace. I think there is an opportunity cost. I think he could have gotten well ahead of the pace, if not pretty much cemented himself as the GOAT pending, any kind of statistical production over the next 5 to 10 years. Hang on one second. Y'all can talk for a minute.
You gonna sneeze? I was gonna say that nobody has talked about the streak of AFC Championship appearances for Patrick Mahomes. The longest streak in Brady's career was from 11 to 18, which is 8 years. The same as LeBron James, who had a streak to the finals for 8 straight seasons. And that kind of gets brushed off because he didn't win a bunch of finals in that streak. But I think it's just as impressive for Mahomes to be in the mix every single year. He's not been a starter and not been in the AFC Championship game. I mean, it just seems like an insane run that we're just giving up on because he didn't win a Super Bowl. By the way, Tom Brady never won 3 in a row. And nobody who won 3 Super Bowls won 3 in a row. And the only quarterback who went 3 times in a row was the Dolphins quarterback in the early 70s that lost one and then won 2 Super Bowls in a row. So to even be in 3 Super Bowls in a row is impressive enough to me. Well, that might sound like cope, but it's true.
A few more things on that. They've both now they actually have really comparable seasons to start their career because they both basically redshirted as a rookie, and then through 7 years as a starter. Now we could compare side by side. The only place where they're kind of tied is Super Bowl rings, 3 each. Mahomes was the MVP in all 3 of those. Brady only 2. Again, Brady won one of those Super Bowl MVPs, leading his team to 2 touchdown drives in the entire postseason, 145 yards passing. Mahomes has had better halves in a Super Bowl than that. But Mahomes is ahead in touchdowns, touchdown to INT ratio, yards. He's a better runner, more playoff wins, better numbers in the playoffs, more fourth quarter comebacks, more game winning drives. And so, I don't know, to me to say, like, well, it's over after year 7 because of a Super Bowl loss when Brady missed the playoffs in those first 7 years and then failed to get back to another Super Bowl besides the 3 that he won. Actually, no, I think 2007 was included in that. So he was 3-1 in Super Bowls in that same window. It's just wild to me, especially with Mahomes' playoff numbers. What's kind of funny to me, yes, it was garbage time. Do either of you know what Mahomes' passer rating was when the clock hit all zeros on Sunday?
It was probably pretty decent after the fourth quarter.
It was 95,
Yeah.
which is like good. Without looking, I would guess that's higher than Brady's career average. So you can look at that and say, oh, Mahomes has never played worse than this, which is mostly true. And again, mostly garbage time. But he led his team in rushing through 3 touchdowns, had a 70-yard FU throw that didn't matter, but was still kind of cool. That and then finished with a 95 rating. So, that it kind of sneaks its way into the discourse because people will pull up his 21 playoff games and be like, here's his passer rating. Had he finished with a passer rating of 27 the other night, it would have like brought that average down. But instead, it's like, okay, he kind of like salvaged one of the key data points that people look at. So yeah, to me, through 7 years, there's nothing on Mahomes' resume that you go, yeah, if he plays another 10 or 12 or 15, there's just no way he could possibly catch up to what Brady did because he's way ahead through 7 years. Again, I do think he needs to take advantage of the next, what would that be, 7 or 8, so that he doesn't have to do at age 42, 43 what Brady was doing. But no, I don't think the goat chatter is over at all. At least it's not for me. Like I said, I think there's a lot of people that would never give him a chance anyway, just because Brady was first and it's too entrenched in their mind. Again, not trying to open a can of worms. I think a lot of people are like that with Michael Jordan as well. That they were never going to entertain the thought that LeBron James or anybody else might surpass him. I also saw something interesting the other day that um, the Bulls and Michael Jordan in the 90s, their popularity rating was not only higher than like any sports dynasty since then, but like 3 times higher. Like the early 2000s Yankees, Tiger Woods, the Patriots, orders of magnitude less popular, less favorable rating than Michael Jordan and the Bulls. I think a lot of people aren't really willing to give sports conversations like this an honest assessment of who they think is better or more historic or great or whatever. They just pick a team or a side that they like better and stick to their guns. Now, I recognize the irony in that statement because Patrick Mahomes is my personal favorite athlete in the world, but him and the Chiefs are so hated now that a lot of people are just going to be like, yeah, he's a fraud, he's carried. They're not going to have an honest discussion about it.
Do you want a hot take there?
Sure.
If Twitter was around when the Bulls were winning, they would have hated them too. And you know what nobody brings up with Michael Jordan? He didn't win until the league changed all the rules to benefit Michael Jordan. They call him the Jordan. Just Google the Jordan rules. Nobody ever talks about it. When you talk about the soft NBA of today, that was started because Michael Jordan was getting beat up in the playoffs and the league wanted a superstar. So they changed all the rules to allow Michael Jordan to play finesse basketball.
Yeah, and like, so I like Michael Jordan better than I like LeBron James.
Sure.
Um, but like LeBron James gets clowned for losing in the finals. I'm like, okay, he dragged, Matthew Dellavedova to Game 6 against the 73-win Warriors, and that's supposed to taint his legacy versus like Jordan getting bounced in the first round by the Pistons every year for half a decade. That's kind of where I'm at with like, yes, it was a bad loss for the Chiefs, but they won the AFC for the 5th time in 7 years or 6 years. Why is that, you know, conclusion to the attempted three-peat so much worse than Brady going for a three-peat and losing in the wild card or divisional round to Jake Plummer and the Broncos? To me, it's obviously not. And like LeBron, I think 8 years in a row was in the finals. Didn't win enough of them to really supplant Jordan as the GOAT. But people are like, oh, the East is weak, like, anyone could do it kind of thing. And then after LeBron left the East, it took a good long while and it took a really good Celtics team for somebody to go back 2 years in a row. So it's like we were very quick to dismiss 8 Eastern Conference Finals championships in a row. It's just crazy the things that we convince ourselves is like not actually that hard when we decide we hate an athlete. And so I feel like that's kind of what happens with Mahomes is like we're witnessing statistical greatness. He makes plays and throws that nobody else can really make. And we're like, oh yeah, he's carried by his defense, which is again statistically not a real thing, but people have convinced themselves of it. Um, part of the debate with Jordan and LeBron that I think we might have to have at some point is that Jordan had the higher peak, LeBron's longevity was better. That's why LeBron, passed him in points, rebounds, everything. I don't know if Mahomes will ever catch Brady in rings, but like let's say Mahomes retired at age 36. So 9 years earlier than Brady retired. And it was 7-5. Brady would have outlasted him and would own the total statistical records, but Mahomes would probably own the per game, the efficiency kind of records. There are things Mahomes has done that Brady never did in 23 years that I think are indicative of like a higher peak than Brady was able to achieve in 2+ decades. So I don't know if that'll ever come into the conversation. A few that I can think of is his first year as a starter, became the second player in NFL history to Drew Brees to throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in the same season. won MVP at age 23, which is ridiculous. Only player in NFL history to lead the league in total yards, win MVP, and win Super Bowl MVP in the same season. Brady never did that. Again, won a Super Bowl with the two worst playoff defenses that have ever won a Super Bowl. Brady never won without an elite defense. And, last year, according to DVOA and a lot of other, stats analysis, I think you could make a credible case that they had the toughest path to a Super Bowl championship in NFL history. So yeah, I wish they would have won. It certainly would have enhanced his GOAT reputation, but I think even as bad of a blowout as that was, I'm not ready to, call it curtains quite yet.
These Big 12 officials are reviewing everything in this Kansas State Arizona game. They're
Arizona,
up by 4.
they're Arizonaing so hard.
Yes, they are. Which they hadn't been doing in the last couple of weeks, but certainly in the first half of Big 12 play, even though they won all their games, they choke a lot.
They had a 72% win probability at the final media timeout in this game. And they're getting, it's only a 4-point lead, but they are getting trounced if you're watching the game.
Yes. In the last 2 minutes, for sure. All right. Any final thoughts there on Mahomes or Mahomes' legacy?
I don't know if the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl next year, but I do think that they're going to be like a top 5 contender for the foreseeable future. They have one, maybe two, what I would call bad contracts on the books. They owe Jawan Taylor a lot of money to play right tackle next year. He's usually okay to solid. He was really bad in the Super Bowl. They can't afford to get rid of him next year. They would owe him all the money anyway. And then if Travis Kelce comes back, like he has, I'm not gonna say he's totally washed, but like he's dropped off a lot in the last 2 years, and they owe him some money. But besides that, 31st out of 32 teams in dead cap hit. They owe like 250K in dead cap money next year. So not a lot of wasteful spending at all. And they entered this season as the 4th youngest roster in the NFL. I hope they bring back Hollywood Brown. They brought him in on a 1-year deal to kind of have a prove it deal. He didn't get a chance to prove it because he was hurt. I don't think they'll bring back Hopkins, but if they had Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy, pretty good.
Hopkins retired this morning.
I thought that was fake news. It was like a fake Adam Schefter account.
Oh, was that Scheffler?
Yeah, I think so.
I was doing my show. Scheffler got me.
Yeah.
Damn it.
They need a left tackle really bad. They drafted Kingsley Suamataia to do that last year. I don't know if that's going to work out or not. He was a starter for 2 games this year, and then they were like, okay, this is a disaster. Maybe they'll move him to guard because they probably can't re-sign Trey Smith at right guard. They need a left tackle. I hope that they let Nick Bolton, the inside linebacker, walk just because they're paying too many other guys at positions that don't have a ton of value. Like they pay their kicker. They're paying interior offensive linemen. They're paying their old wash tight end. Like I don't know if they can afford to pay a middle linebacker. So I hope they let him walk. But I think overall they have dudes they need to pay, but they don't have a bad cap situation with like tens of millions in dead cap. They have 3 draft picks in the top 66, so they could reload a little bit if they crush this draft. All that to say, AFC is tough. There's really good quarterbacks in the AFC, but they've got some position groups they'll need to retool a little bit. But I think I don't think they're like going away. I don't think they push all the chips into the middle to try to win this year, and now they've got nothing left. Like they've still got the quarterback, the head coach, a lot of good pieces on both offense and defense. So yeah, you brought it up earlier, 8 straight AFC title games. If they could tie that record, I think that's another feather in their cap. And I hope that he gets another. He's been on an insane pace, but if he could get 2 more rings in the next 6-7 years, I think the twilight of his career, he'll have 2 or 3 seasons to maybe really enter that GOAT conversation. And win some people over.
His dad is fighting John Rocker on Bourbon Street. I think that was a work, which in wrestling parlance is fake. I think they're going to box a celebrity boxing match soon. And I think
Mahomes
Yeah.
Sr. and John Rocker?
Yes. I've heard rumblings that they're going to do a celebrity boxing thing, and then I saw the dust up and I was like, oh, this is fake.
Do you see they both tweeted about it too?
Yes. Yeah, they're in a Twitter spat now.
You're onto something.
Yeah.
And
it's Mets Braves. Like it's
So I'm in a group text with it's a fantasy football group. So there's like Longhorns, Aggies, all kinds of like Houston, Dallas sports allegiances. It's a diverse but inclusive group. And so like they hate Mahomes because none of them are Chiefs fans, none of them are Tech guys. And I'm like, yeah, I would hate him too because like he threw a touchdown pass against the Texans in the playoffs while parallel to the ground. But like I would probably hate him if I didn't love him because like you see his dad, his wife used to be a lot worse than she is now. I don't think she's had anything objectionable in like several years. His brother, I'm not on TikTok. If I was on TikTok and I knew who his brother was, and then they like go back to back going for a three-peat, I would hate them too. So I kind of get the hate. I think a lot of it, if you're actually talking ball, when you start to say like Mahomes is carried and the refs are cheating for the Chiefs, I think a lot of that is nonsense. But just from like again, Michael Jordan, extremely popular. Mahomes is not that because I think in part because his dad is doing things like fighting John Rocker on Twitter, and I wish that his family could kind of clean it up a little bit and project a better public image for him.
Brendan Haasa just missed a free throw. 2-point game, 22 seconds. Another foul. Wow. You're muted, Money.
Have you seen the 3-point shooting numbers in this game?
Yo.
Kansas State is 1 of 19. Arizona is 2 of 21.
Wow. And it's 70-68. That is incredible.
That's awesome.
All right, Money. If I were to put you on the spot and say power rank the Big 12, let's assume Kansas State wins this game. Just give me your top 5 teams in the Big 12 right now, because I think that's a good cutoff.
Can I try and do them in order? Like, I want to go all 16.
Okay, that's even better.
Okay, right now I'd have Houston first, which isn't really, I don't think there's an argument for otherwise, at least unless they win another game. I would go Texas Tech, because if Kansas State wins this game, you have the win over Kansas State in Manhattan. But this game is getting very dicey, so hopefully Kansas State still wins. And then you have the win over Arizona, who's now lost to Kansas State. So I'd have Houston, Texas Tech, Arizona, Iowa State, Baylor? It's either Baylor or Kansas there, I think. So I'd probably actually lean Kansas. Well, if Kansas State wins this game,
that's what I'm saying.
Give me Kansas State, but it's close. And then I'd go Baylor, BYU, West Virginia, UCF or TCU, Cincinnati, Utah, Oklahoma State, Arizona State, Colorado.
Okay. Good segue there. Arizona State will come to Lubbock on Wednesday at 8 p.m. We'll discuss that as we move forward into the Patreon episode. If you are listening on YouTube, thank you. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Tell us who you think the GOAT of the NFL is, any position, but it's Patrick Mahomes. You can also hit subscribe, hit the like, whatever it is. All right. If you're listening on Republic of Football, thank you. Good night or good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. If you are already on Patreon, we'll see you in a minute. If you're not, you can get there by going to patreon.com/gamblingauchos and get a lot of money's write-ups. Kyle will start writing up off-season football, and we'll get to lots of other things as well. We might even talk about James Blanchard as we continue on in our episode. Thank you for joining us. Love y'all.